It's midnight, and there's a knock, knock, knock on your door. You look through the peephole, and it's two unaccompanied children. You open the door because if they were your children, you would want someone to open their door. But as they raise their heads, you realize their eyes are all black, and maybe they're not human.
What you are about to hear is believed to be real, based on witness accounts, testimonies, and public record. This is terrifying and true.
A parallel universe, third dimension, or maybe a world that exists within ours, except that we cannot see it. We've all been bombarded with stories of the unknown for our entire lives. Theories and legends of the existing yet the non-existing world has always been a topic we can't help but be intrigued towards. Tonight, we're drawn towards the black-eyed children. It's hard to say if these children are real, and if they are real, whether or not they're a part of a paranormal universe. But either way, they're really creepy, and just might make it hard for you to sleep tonight, like it has so many others. We're telling that story after these quick words from our sponsors. Legends of the black-eyed children go back to 1996, when incidents of their encounters were first reported in a ghost-related mailing list out of Texas. These children had entirely black eyes and dead-like pale skin. Just the horrors of the way they looked were enough to scare anyone away. It's said that these children would usually appear near residential areas. They would either beg for money or hitchhike. On most occasions, they would try and indulge people in conversation or ask them to do something for them. While it's usually hard to say no to children in need, these kids are specifically spooky and far from anything human. Anyone in their sane mind would run for their lives instead of stopping and helping them. There aren't many accounts of what they sound like or where they go after scaring someone, which is exactly what makes this tale so interesting. We can't for sure tell if these kids are supernatural, extraterrestrial, or maybe some kind of a unfortunate deformation. And of course, they could simply not exist at all. In one bone-chilling event reported about the black-eyed children, a mother in Vermont made the unfortunate mistake of inviting two toddlers with black eyes into her home in January of 2016. She heard a soft knock on the front door as a blizzard raged outside. Two kids, a girl and a boy, begged to use her phone as they stood there, shivering. The woman welcomed them even though she did suspect something was shady and proceeded to get her phone. The mother noticed the children's eyes were totally black when they came into the living room where there was more light. Her husband's nose started to bleed as she gaped in horror at them, and at that moment, the power went out. The kids finally announced their parents' arrival in unison after what seemed like a lifetime. The woman saw the two silently leave her home and get into a plain black sedan driven by a man in a suit. The woman's spouse was given a serious skin cancer diagnosis not long after the bizarre meeting, and she herself started having frequent nosebleeds, along with a host of other health problems. She believed the black-eyed children she unintentionally allowed into their home are to blame for her deteriorating health, as well as that of her husband. In another encounter, a 12-year-old child had a terrifying event in a store parking lot on March 17, 2008. He observed a child walking across the parking lot as he waited in his mother's truck for her to finish getting a haircut. The boy pounded on the window until the other boy turned because he thought it was a friend from school. The child in the truck realized it wasn't his pal and watched in disbelief as the odd kid approached and peered through the window. The child only needed to take one look into the other boy's intensely dark eyes to realize he was staring into the face of evil. The black-eyed child pleaded, "You must let me in." The youngster in the car cowered under the glove box in a panic. The boy with the black eyes ultimately vanished after some time. The boy's mother informed her son that the black-eyed child had entered the salon and demanded the keys to her car. Luckily for all, the boy's mother resisted. But that's not all. November 19th, 1992. A man was binge-watching Evil Dead while his wife and kids slept peacefully in the upstairs bedrooms. After the movie, he made the decision to go to bed at 1:30 a.m. His front door was suddenly being pounded on, loudly, and what was behind the door would permanently change his life. A boy and a girl, ages 8 and 11, stood there, barefoot in the Michigan winter, without looking up. Despite his confusion, the man let the children inside so they could call their parents, but when he went to give them the phone, they were gone. He initially heard a scream coming from one of the upstairs bedrooms. He ran upstairs, and when he entered his wife's room, he was horrified to see her lying in a pool of blood, hearing bones breaking and skin tearing. And he saw the bare feet of those children he had just let into the house. In spite of the man's best efforts, he was powerless to save his children and stood helpless behind the door. When the act was finished, the door slowly creaked open, and there stood the barefoot children, covered in blood. They stood defiantly, with horrible grins and eyes that were completely black. In a suburban area of the United States, a woman was spending Thanksgiving alone when she heard a knock at her door, just after 7:30 p.m. She opened it without looking, assuming it was one of her neighbors. But there were two boys standing in a eerie position, avoiding eye contact and insisting on going inside. The oldest of the two boys persisted until the mother got uneasy, and when they finally glanced up, the woman saw they had completely black eyes. They kept knocking on the door after she slammed it behind her. She eventually dozed off during the early hours of the morning with all the lights on, as well as her television. But when she woke up, she discovered that the lights had been switched off and that the television was broadcasting static. Someone, or something, had been inside her home. Like a trend, these stories have been surfacing one after the other. What's astonishing is that these black-eyed children somehow made it to the United Kingdom as well. A teenage couple from Staffordshire reported a chilling encounter with a black-eyed child. The couple, who was 17 back when the incident occurred, reported that the ghostly figure of a child had been roaming around their tent throughout the night while they were camping. This incident is fairly recent. It occurred during the summer of 2021. The couple had heard movement outside their tent in the night and dismissed it initially, until they thought they heard clear footsteps. And then they made that very common mistake of chasing noises and sounds in a scary location. They went out to take a look at whoever it was, only to be shocked as they found a little girl was running around, hiding behind the trees. It wasn't until a few minutes later, when the girl finally stepped out, that the couple noticed her eyes. This also brings me to think that in most encounters, people didn't spot the black eyes immediately. It was only until they had actually made a conversation or when things got out of hand. These children probably look very real, and encounters with them also lead to the victims facing a lifetime of consequences. Unlike other ghostly creatures who appear in front of the human eye, these children are harmful. The couple then heard giggling that echoed all around them. Scared to death, they ended up hiding in their tent again until sunrise. When they got up and decided to leave at around 7 a.m., they saw stones all across their tent, and they were placed at even distances from each other. They also saw a lot of sticks hanging from the trees around them. It was obvious that their encounter the previous night was not some kind of misunderstanding. While leaving, they saw a little child with black eyes sitting behind a tree, and the minute they laid eyes on the kid, they started screaming with fear and terror. The man recalls hearing the kid say, "Leave us alone." Adding to the intrigue, in that part of England, legend says there was a child who was murdered in the early 1960s and has been around ever since. Author Lee Brickley released around 4 books over the past decade with stories and research about these children. He also claims to have his own encounters with the black-eyed kids on multiple occasions. His own stories might be the reason he got into researching it in the first place. He once saw a kid with black eyes who vanished minutes after being spotted by him. This is one of those rare instances where the child was reported to have completely vanished into thin air. Lee Brickley writes, quote, "I believe the woods are haunted with many spirits of the dead. There are also lots of monster sightings that happen here, and I think those creatures come from another, much darker place." Stories like these are obviously traumatic for the victims, but at the same time, they become a sensation in the entertainment industry. Everything about our days is mostly storytelling, and who wouldn't want to turn an urban legend into a major motion picture? Throughout the history of cinema, one simple line has helped many horror films reach massive success. Based on true events. While most people dismissed these stories, many ghost hunters took the matter more seriously. These spooky kids have a bigger picture to them than just being ghosts. Some experts called them monsters, vampires, and other legendary creatures of the night. The problem here is that no one has been able to actually touch or feel the creatures, let alone capture them on video or in a photograph to prove their existence. One more encounter I found particularly interesting was back in 2010. A man called Noetic saw 2 black-eyed teenagers outside his office in Ohio. He was working a night shift and decided to take a break to smoke a cigarette. He went outside and saw 2 boys across the street staring straight at him. After a while of feeling uneasy, Noetic went back to work inside the office. A while later, he noticed on the security monitors that the boys were standing outside at the office door, staring right at the camera, indicating for him to come outside. Annoyed, Noetic decided to call the police and report the boys, but as if the boys knew what he was up to, they indicated for him to not do anything of that sort, since they only needed to make a call from his phone. Regardless, Noetic ended up calling the police when the boys didn't leave and kept a constant eye on them through the screen. When the police arrived, they couldn't find any evidence of those children he had seen on the screen. So, what are the black-eyed children? Are they supernatural, paranormal, of another world? Well, the fact is, there's no real evidence of the black-eyed children. That's right, every account you just heard was the stuff of modern legend. Even in our era of constant information being accessible from all over the world, the black-eyed children are a bunch of stories with no one claiming they actually happened to them, for the most part. Every story I read to you here today had no specific name, just a date. That should always be a red flag, that a story may not be entirely true. But that being said, I wanted to do an episode about the black-eyed children because, simply put, legends and folklore are wonderful. I love listening and learning about legends, folklore, folk tales, anything like that. Well, the black-eyed children is a more modern take, but it is folklore nonetheless. But that doesn't make the stories any less exciting to hear. I hope that while you were sitting down and listening to this program, you were feeling very creeped out and wondering if you were going to hear a knock on your door too. But at the end of the day, the black-eyed children is a folktale spread by the internet incredibly fast, and most likely, nothing more. I hope you didn't mind me pulling a little bit of a fast one on you all this week. Sometimes I just love the folklore more than I care about it being 100% true. That's why I made sure to come clean at the end that these are entirely unsubstantiated, but they're a whole hell of a lot of fun and definitely a welcome break from some of the harsher true crime stories we cover here. Even I am a human being and need a little bit of a break from carnage, mayhem, and murder. But what about you out there? Have you heard about the black-eyed children or other modern folklore like the Rake or maybe Jeff the Killer? They're fun stuff. Probably not real, but very fun to listen to. And honestly, I'd love to hear about your favorite terrifying folklore, and hey, if we find enough about it, maybe we'll even do a whole episode dedicated to it. You can email us at weeklyspooky@gmail.com with any and all of your terrifying and true or only hopefully true stories. We'd love to hear them. I hope you're all doing very well as the summer is getting hotter and hotter. But here at Weekly Spooky, we always keep things chilling. So until next time, stay safe, stay cool, and whatever you do, don't answer the door for the black-eyed children. Just trust me on this one. Terrifying and True is narrated by Enrique Couto. It's executive produced by Rob Fields, produced by Daniel Wilder, with original theme music by Ray Mattis. If you have a story you'd like us to cover on the program, send us an email at weeklyspooky@gmail.com. And if you want to support us in a very direct way, go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can support us and allow us to keep the spooky rolling and rolling and rolling. And I want to say a big thank you to our Patreon podcast boosters, folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their names on the show. And they are Bobbletopia, Megan Hua, Julia Kirsch, Christopher Sullivan, Brent McCullough, Gino Lyons, Steve King, Karen Wiemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. Thank you all so very much, and we'll see you next Monday.